before we start, don't leave. Do I have everybody's permission to give her a birthday hug?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, friends. I gotta tell you, Jackie, I didn't know what to expect. And not only was the music lovely, but the visuals were really outstanding. And I will tell you truthfully, considering some of the temperatures we've had recently, weren't the pictures of snow just fabulous? All right, my dear friends. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. Some of you were here last week. Some of you were not. Oh, I know what I have to do. I made a promise to somebody who let me know that that person would be watching on Zoom this morning, and I said, I will give you a secret wave. Okay, it's not secret, I'm waving. I'm waving to my friend on Zoom. Ordinarily that person would be with us, but not today. So, moving right along. Do I have a trip story? No. Can you believe that? I don't have a trip story. Well, other than the fact that I knew when I was going to be getting off the eastbound lanes and transitioning to the westbound lanes, but still continuing east. And I did it. I did it without any problems. I think everybody else got it too. There were no, like, whoa, God, slamming on the brakes or anything. And I do think I may have broken a record. I think I made it from 10 Mile and Telegraph to Maple Road without ever touching the brake. That's 5 miles, folks. That is world-class driving. Okay, I'm patting my own shoulder. It is a pleasure to see you. And we have one more. We have one more next week in this series. This has been God's success plan for us. And I said there are 3 parts to it. Be, do, have. Last week we did be, based on the idea of our identity. What is our reality? It's our identity as an embodied example of the presence of God. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and who's ever in the back, about 10 or 12 people probably. 12 gods. Oh, 12 is a really mystical number. We can expect wonderful things this morning. I don't know what's going to happen yet, but we'll see. So based on our identity as an embodied presence of God, what are we here to do? Well, do. Do what? Well, I thought about it at great length. And the first thing that came to my mind, probably from old training, was the don't list from the Old Testament. You know what the don't list is? It's those 10 things. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And we all get that pretty early in our lives. In addition to things like don't throw your food on the floor, or don't smack your siblings, or anything like that. And I thought, no. I did think about some of the significant ones, because they color our approach to life and what we are willing to do. The first one, of course, is do not have false gods. There's only one God, friends. Do not have false gods. And I thought, okay, what are false gods? Well, at the time of the writing of this, in biblical times, there were statues, there were mountains, there were trees, there were rocks. People believed that God inhered in them, or lived in them, or was them. We know better than that. But don't we have false gods? And I thought, what would false gods be? I am a success if I live in that kind of house, or I drive that kind of car, or I take that kind of trip. Because what does that mean? That means I'm a success. I've got the money to do it. Really? Well, folks, you know what? You can get on a Greyhound. No, there are no more Greyhound buses. But you can get on a bus. You can take it to Niagara Falls. And you can stand there and look at the majesty of the river going over the falls. And say thank you. Thank you for the beauty. Thank you for the electric power. Thank you for the magnificence of creation. Okay, so try not to have false gods. You know what else? One of the other false gods is when I weigh, when I get on the scale, and we have this imaginary number in our mind, then I'll be fabulous. And stuff like that. And stuff like that. Friends, they're not significant points. They're not significant points. They don't make us other than who we already are, which is an individualized expression of God, regardless of what the number on the scale says, or the balance on the bank sheet, or the vehicle that we got here in. That is not, let's not make it a false God. Let's not make it a false God. Because friends, what we're here to do is, that's what I just said, what we're here to do is do. So how? How do we do? Riches, we admire someone. We look at people who have seemed to achieve certain levels of success. And we say, okay, that's good. They're doing well. How many times have we heard people interviewed on radio, TV, wherever we're hearing people interviewed today, and they say, well, here's what I want to do. And they give us a list of accomplishments. You know, I want this much in my bank account. I want to be able to do this. I want to have 3 AI companies, and on and on and on. And I'm going, I don't know. Okay, in those terms, I am a complete and total failure. I haven't got any of those. But do I have a vehicle that gets me here every Sunday when I'm speaking? Yes. Why? Because it has the basic necessities. It has an internal combustion engine. It has 4 wheels. I put gas in the car. I put the key in the ignition. It turns over. I raise the garage. Well, the garage door is already up. And as I pull out, I recite the prayer for protection. And I get here. And I have wonderful adventures along the way, and then I am here, and I am empowered to stand up behind this microphone and speak truth. You know, it dawned on me that next June it will be 40 years, the anniversary of my ordination. Yeah, I know. How old is she? Never mind. Anyway, when I was ordained, we didn't have stuff like this, folks. I remember my first ministry had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and the retired dentist was the one who ran it. And when you took it home and played it, it was like, you mean I gave him $5 for this? Because it was scratchy, it was... And today, we have technology. But does that make our truth any more significant than it did when Mr. Fillmore first initiated it and said, there is only one God, one power, one presence in the universe, and you are an individualized expression of it. You are an individualized expression of it, and it doesn't depend on what kind of stuff you have. What is, you are here for a purpose. You are here for a purpose. So on a more positive note, I stepped away from the don'ts and I looked at the do's. And I looked at the words of Jesus, who among other things said, love one another as I have loved you. Love one another as I have loved you. Well, how did he love? Of course, he loved fully. He loved joyously. He demonstrated that love first by teaching people that there was one power and one presence, and that he and all the rest of us are in that power and that presence. We are an individualized expression of that. When he said, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. So folks, this morning, if you crane your neck around, you will have seen the presence of God. All the way to the last row in the t-shirt, all the way by there when she gets back to the organ, up here, Betsy, Sean on the other side of the door. We've seen God. We've seen God. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to happen. The two of you looked across the aisle at each other and thought, there's God. Aren't I fortunate to be able to see that person? Aren't I fortunate to be able to see that person? And to see all the people that we have seen, those who have shared the moment of life with us and have since transitioned to another level of life, to another level of life, friends. And then Jesus also said, and not in so many words, but it's been used by so many different organizations, theories, philosophies, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. Sometimes it's expressed negatively. Do not do to those which you would not wish to have done to yourself. I don't like do nots, because I got so many of them when I was a kid. So I like a do much better. Do what you can. Friends, one of the most challenging parts is doing. Why? Because we judge others. We judge others. We look at somebody else and we go, We're walking down the street and somebody in front of us. I had this happen the other day. There's going to be a lot of true confessions, folks. There was a person, a lady of a certain age, walking in front of me, wearing a pair of short shorts. And my first thought was, oh, honey, if you could only see what I see from behind you. It was not attractive. It was not attractive. But did I simply say, don't make that choice, Linda? Oh no, I gave her the third degree on how could you possibly do that? Aren't you paying attention? Blah, 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 blah. I just ripped her a new one in my mind. And then I went, Linda, and the Holy Spirit smacked me upside the face and said, have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror and seen perhaps what you look like as you're walking away? Because that's something else that was said. Judge not, lest ye be judged. But what do we do, friends? One of the worst things we do is we judge all the time. And that is something that inhibits us from doing. Well, what if I do that? What will people think of me? What if I do that? What will the person that I've said it to or done it for think of me? Or how are other people going to judge me because of what I did? I would hazard the guess that among all of the Unity ministers whom I know, when they made the announcement to their circle of friends, family, etc., and said, I'm going to go study to be a Unity minister, not everybody sent up a cheer. I do remember what my mother said to me. She said, well, sweetheart, she said, I can understand that you would want to improve yourself, but maybe you should study computers. Because computers were the big thing 40 years ago. She had a point. However, I have never regretted having gone into ministry as opposed to studying computers. Friends, one of our biggest issues in doing is fear. Fear. How will I be received? Will I be judged? I want to read something to you that's on my phone. I don't usually do this. I like to tell the story but not read it word for word. However, this story is so significant because it was written by someone else. I know that in this congregation, many of you would be familiar with the name Gary Zukov and his partner, Linda Francis. I had the privilege of meeting both of them in Portland, Oregon, at Reverend Mary Mann Morrissey's. She had a retreat. I forget how many days it was. It was fantastic. And they were the featured people for that week, along with several other people. There was one downside to the whole retreat. They decided to make it vegetarian. Folks, you don't take a large group of people who are basically meat eaters and make them vegetarians overnight without certain consequences. I'm not going to go into that, but it was a challenge. It was a challenge, but we got through it. And so some years later, I ran into the two of them, not ran into, but encountered the two of them at a Unity conference. I think it was maybe about 10 years later. And then again, somewhere else. And of course, I've read Gary's books. So it did not surprise me when I got this email, which said, it has been 4 years since the soul of Gary's beloved spiritual partner, Linda Francis, returned home to non-physical reality on August 6, 2022. I had known that. I was stunned. Her death was extremely sudden. They were discreet in way it was written, but basically they were standing in the kitchen, he and she. In 1 second, she was alive, and the next second, she was on the floor. And then they called an ambulance. She was never resuscitated. Personally, I could see a blessing in that, although it is a terrible challenge for those who remain. So on this anniversary, this 4th anniversary, Gary published this, and he did so by putting out a story written by Linda, a real event. It's this: a small thing with great love. And this is writing. I planned for the middle seat to remain empty so Gary and I could do some work together. Then, just as we were getting ready to close the door, this man came on the plane. He was in his 60s, disheveled, unshaven, and looked like he hadn't bathed. And he made a beeline straight for the empty seat between us. I scooted over to sit next to Gary, who was sitting by the window. I noticed what my body seemed to do on its own. I turned my back to him and pushed him away energetically. The thought came to me, I'm judging him. Then he ordered a bourbon at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was going to be a 5-hour cross-country flight. And I thought, oh boy, I don't know what is going to happen on this flight with him sitting next to me. We've all been in situations like that. If we weren't on a plane, we were in a closed environment with an issue that we would have preferred not to be experiencing. She continues to say, but I kept getting this message from my intuition: turn to him, talk to him. A part of me kept pushing him away. So after struggling a while, I decided, okay, I'll say hello to him. And I said it with love. Tears started coming down his face. He said, I just buried my daughter and now I'm going home. Tears started coming down her face. We spent the whole time on the plane talking. I think he desperately needed to talk. And equally as important, he also needed to see the parts, I needed to see the parts of myself that keep me separate from anyone, no matter what they look like or what they're doing. I saw that it doesn't mean anything if someone doesn't look the way fear-based parts of my personality think they should. I was so grateful for the opportunity to be with him and talk with him and not let those parts of my personality control me. That experience showed me how following my intuition and doing a small thing with great love could turn an ordinary experience of pushing away a stranger on an airplane into an extraordinary experience of love, compassion, and deep connection. I always try to remember it. I'm happy to share it with you. And she goes on to say, perhaps the next time a fear-based part of your personality pushes someone away, you will consult your intuition and encounter a miracle like I did. Well, after I put the phone down, I said, thank you, God. That'll preach. And I was so moved by that story. What is it that we fear about the other? And then I thought, no, it isn't what we fear about the other. It's what we fear we might discover about ourselves. So a couple days passed, and yesterday I was out running errands, getting ready to come here, and I checked the gas gauge and I went, I need to put in just a little bit more to be on the safe side. Because folks, I will tell you, going home from here, I never know what's going to be closed and what isn't going to be closed. And I got so lost last week, it took me 2 hours to get home. I actually had to get my phone out and ask Miss Google how to get me home, and she did. So I thought, I'll just top it up. So I stopped at one of my local spots, and I thought, at $3.99 a gallon, I just need $10 worth. So I opened my wallet, I took out five singles, and put my wallet back in my purse, left my purse in the car, money in one hand, keys in the other, closed the door. And as I did, there was somebody sitting, I don't know what he was sitting on. There was a sort of middle-aged black man sitting on something next to the pump. And he started to speak to me. And I couldn't quite hear him from where I was. So I walked around to the front of him and I said, I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please? And he said something about, I'm short, this is a tough way, I need money. And I paused, and I said, well, I'm a little tight myself this week, but I can give you $2. And so I took $2 and I gave it to him. Then I turned away, because now I had to go back to the car. Remember, I needed $10 worth of gas, and now I only had 8 in my hand. I opened the door, I dug out my purse, my wallet, and as I stood there, Spirit spoke to me and said, Linda, what do you think he's going to do with $2? If he needed gas, he could only buy half a gallon. And I got it. So I took $2 out, put it in my left hand so that I'd have $10 for the gas. I took $3 out, put it in my right hand. I walked around the front of the car. I came back to him and I said, I gave you $2. I said, you can't do anything with $2. I said, here's $3 more. Now you've got $5. Maybe you could go and buy yourself lunch or something, and you have a blessed day. And I turned away. He said, bless you too, and I went and bought my gas. When I came out, he was standing behind the rear of my car near my gas thingy, and I thought, what's going on there? And when I got around the side, I realized he'd opened my gas tank, put the thing in, the nozzle in, and said, just go ahead and punch, you got to hit whether you want regular, Sue, whatever. And I said, that's okay, I'd rather do that myself. He said, oh, okay. So I pumped the gas, I got in the car, and I drove away. And then God spoke to me. What were you doing, Linda? And I said, well, how do I know he wasn't going to walk across the street to that convenience store and buy a bottle of booze and throw it down his throat? I mean, I went into super judgment, folks. Super judgment. And then it hit me. That's not your business, Linda. That's not your business. You were called to do, and all you had to do, and to say, I'm a little tight this week, and you've been working that 40-day program for 3 years now, and you said you were a little tight this week? Where is your head, girl? And I went, okay, thank you, God. Thank you, God. And the story is judgment. But who was I judging? Was I judging him? Oh, yes, very much so. But I was also judging myself. Friends, and that is our greatest do not. Because if we truly understand that our identity, that who we are, is as an individualized living expression of God, what could we possibly judge? What could be lacking? What could there be any fault in? We are the embodiment of the perfection of the Holy One. All that is in the universe is ours when we choose to claim it. It was Ernest Holmes who said, there is a power for good in the universe, and you ought to use it. Not you might use it, or you may use it, or think about using it. You ought to use it. And that is the power that we have. We have the freedom to do. So friends, actually one of the greatest do's that we can do, things that we can do, actions that we can take, is forgiveness. Unity's teaching on this is so profound. When we forgive, we give up, fill in the blank between the parentheses, for what? For peace, for serenity, for an awareness of God present to us. And the problem is, friends, before we judge anyone else, we are judging ourselves. We are judging ourselves. Which is why I tell you every morning, you walk into the bathroom, jammies, nightgown, I don't care, t-shirt, what you're wearing, bedhead, I don't care. You look in the mirror and go, good morning, God. Thank you for yesterday. What am I going to thank you for today? Because that is our identity. And when we have clarity on that identity, that we are here to be an individualized expression of God, then we can let go and let God be God in us, as us, and through us, and fulfill our true identity. So as we move into our time of meditation, it is going to be a meditation of forgiveness of ourselves. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment, to see yourself at some age. Could be today, 10 years ago, 40, 50, 60 years ago, at some age where you erroneously made the decision to judge yourself because someone else judged you. They found you lacking or wrong in some way, and you accepted it. And so as we do this, we say within ourselves, Dear God, I know that I am made in your image and likeness, that I am good, that I am whole, that I am healed, I am abundantly supplied regardless of appearances. I am healthy regardless of appearances. And I am loving regardless of nasty words or harsh feelings. And I forgive myself for not living up to the truth of who I am. I know that you forgive me, God. I ask that you give me the grace to forgive myself, that I may be here to do love, that we may fulfill the words of Jesus. Love one another as I have loved you. And taking his example, we love ourselves and all others with a full heart. Slowly and gently we allow our awareness to return to this space as we sing and pray together the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom